Hey everyone, welcome to the RevOps Co-op video interview series. My name is Sebastian, and today I'm going to be interviewing Richard Makara. Richard is the Principal Growth Engineer at Paddle. He is in Helsinki, Finland, and we're going to talk today about all things RevOps, growth engineering, and his story. Well, welcome, Richard.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for showing up. I like to start all these kind of the same way because we're all solving the same problems with different technology and from different angles. And so, in your opinion and in your own words, define RevOps. What does RevOps mean to you?
I like that RevOps has become like a popular term in recent years. Revenue I think is the key word here. In my mind, anything that touches revenue and helps revenue in the process can be thought of revenue operations. That's basically why, to me, RevOps can be success operations, marketing operations, sales operations, data and insights, whatever you need sort of on the commercial side to help further the growth path, so to say, right?
Yeah. Cool. And how did you come up with that definition? What experience do you have that informs that?
Probably seeing a couple of silos and just being annoyed from the fact that you have siloed operations teams. That means you have siloed data teams or siloed data, sorry. And then things just don't usually work. If you have a dedicated operations team, that tends to mean you have your own sort of sets of focuses, goals, and they might be completely different, even though the overarching goal of all of these teams is the same, to help the company grow. So I think over the years, I've sort of grown into this thought that it just should be all under one roof. And luckily at Paddle, we have the privilege to have all of these functions under one roof.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love that. One of the main jobs of this function is to combine, formerly disparate teams, marketing, sales, success, data, e-commerce, even, depending on what you're selling. And so there's a lot of linking of teams that should have been linked the whole time. So I definitely feel you there. So let's talk a little bit more about the team at Paddle, because I think you have an interesting split of responsibilities, and kind of the way that Paddle thinks about RevOps is a little bit different from what I've seen commonly. So yeah, give us a little rundown on what the Paddle team looks like in the RevOps side of things.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's probably good to have a slight history lesson, context lesson type of thing before we talk about the Paddle revenue operations team. At Paddle, the sort of commercial data has always been quite important. In fact, up to the C-level, up to the founders, they've understood that it's very important to have operations, and that really helps your business. So even before I joined, even before RevOps became RevOps, there was a team called Commercial Operations, which was essentially like this combination of all operation functions, data, etc. So when we started building up the revenue operations team, the head of RevOps, Ben, he figured that instead of sort of building it by function as it typically is, he wanted to build it on skill set or sort of focus area, right? So at Paddle, at the moment, there's 3 core distinct teams that are revenue operations. There's data and insights. So these are the folk who work with the data warehouse, do the data cleaning, run SQL models, they build the analytics dashboards. They are the ones that work with the data. There's tooling and training. That's sort of more the actual SaaS application human piece, where that team works on the actual tools or with the tools. So for example, Salesforce administration goes straight up in there. That team manages Salesforce, builds Salesforce, works with the stakeholders, with the sales teams, partially marketing as well. And then together they sort of figure out what are the sort of human elements that are needed for this piece to work. And it's the same thing for some of the other tools, HubSpot, Outreach, right? So that's sort of where that team focuses on. And lastly, there's the growth engineering department, which currently is me and my colleague Axel. And it's a bit of it's a kind of a cool ambiguous team, because growth engineering historically is a marketing term, and it's very close to growth hacking, growth teams. To us, that's a bit different. We are not only doing marketing, we are building the foundations for the rest of the organization. And what do I mean by that? Because that sounds a bit,
yeah.
Right. So the way I like to describe it is the back end of the commercial data and tooling stack. My job, our team's job, is to basically integrate every single tool that we need to. We need to figure out how that map of tools works together in a sensible and scalable fashion, right? You don't want to have like a spider web of zaps just flying around left, right, and center, and then you just, like, years later, you're just looking around like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is this here? So our job is to build that map of tech, connections, processes, data flows, basically set up the entire architecture that enables data and insights tooling. Downstream, then it enables the sales teams, marketing teams, success teams. It's the way I like to sort of describe it as a creative problem solving role. Sometimes we sit and write code for several weeks. Sometimes all we have to do is draw around in a Miro board, figure out how this works together. Is it going to mess around with any of our other tools or data flows? Currently, we're redesigning our architecture to be more along the lines of the modern data stack, with the whole ETL piece, with the warehouse thing, the reverse thing. So it's really cool. I personally really enjoy it. It allows us to focus on the things we're really good at, while then sort of providing the value, the shared goal value to the rest of the organization.
Got it. Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't seen a team split up like that, and I imagine there's a lot of crossing over. If the tooling and training is in Salesforce, they still need reporting, so data and insights gets a little bit involved, and then growth and engineering is kind of involved throughout, because all these tools are connecting together to generate data and insights for the leadership team, and like kind of you're helping that move along. So give us a sense of scale here, like how big is the paddle team, how much activity, and like would it be a crazy spider web of work if it weren't for this RevOps team, and like what does that look like?
Right. So let's unpack that. The size of our current team, 9 people and growing. Data and insights has a bit more, because there's a never-ending amount of
course,
data visualization work. Tooling and training, 3 people. Growth and engineering, 2. I'm pretty sure we've just hired someone as well. But my point there is there is enough value that we've shown that we receive the headcount and we keep growing. Then to the question of how big of a spider web is, like, there is a substantial amount of like mainstream tooling that we use that definitely like warrants somebody to look at it through like a lens of how should I put it? Like a Sherlock Holmes type of inspection lens. Because again, like, if you think of a tech stack, you can think of like just maybe 3-4 tools. Maybe you'll have your product where the data sits. You need to connect that somehow. For Paddle, we are at a maturity stage where we have frankly implemented a lot of the mainstream pieces of kit that you would think that you would want to have. So we have like the marketing hub is obviously HubSpot, but then to HubSpot you have several other smaller integrations connected. You've got Vistia for demos, metadata for ads. There's a couple of other ones. Salesforce, obviously the big one. It's our hub of truth for bookings. Obviously being a sort of product company where you can become a client without sales being involved. There's that whole interaction in there as well. Salesforce obviously connected to various other tools, Outreach, Drift is in the mix for chats. That's a cool one because it's not like a two-way, you can't integrate that thing like just with one piece of kit, just for the marketers or just for sales. You have to kind of like do the both for it to be really, really useful, right?
Yeah.
We have a CDP or like a data platform that we've centralized our data flow through. In the future, in the next coming months, we'll have, as I mentioned, the data warehouse, the ETL tooling, success side. There's a couple of other ones. But I mean, from the sounds of it, you can probably tell there's quite a few like to sort of never. And the way I like to think about this is when we integrate a new piece of tool, or not a new piece of tool, when we integrate a new SaaS application, I need to think about it in a way that if I integrate it today in this manner, can I integrate a similar tool tomorrow easily? Or does it become a custom job again? Because this is what you don't want. You don't want to build your entire tech stack to be completely custom and reliant. And I'll probably keep using this Zapier example. Like, just full disclosure, I have no beef with Zapier. Zapier is fantastic for specific pieces of life and situations. Fantastic, but sometimes I've seen like entire organizations being built around Zaps, and that obviously has limitations. Not to mention like how many events it can go through it without it sort of stopping, but then also the sort of completely custom aspect of that. My point there, I think, was that I need to think about the integrations in a scalable manner. I can't just like plug and play and then, whatever, we'll see you tomorrow, because things will break, and things will break the next time we add something. And then it's another few weeks of work that we don't want to do. Like, the point is to automate ourselves out of the equation. I'm not entirely sure if that answered your question, but
no, it does. It does. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's a pretty complex mix of activities, of technologies, of different teams, all happening at once. And so,
but
like you said,
the thing there is,
ahead.
But to be honest, the thing there is, it doesn't have to be at this sort of amount or this level. Like, I personally don't believe that you need to have so many tools in order to start thinking about these things, right? In fact, it makes total sense that if you're starting up, you only have minimal amount of tech integrated, you definitely should think about how you want to integrate these things. Because again, you start growing, people will come in, people will leave, especially if you have these apps sitting somewhere in the ethers. 2 years later, somebody's going to show up and be like, how are we getting our product contacts into HubSpot? And what is this random webhook or this form that gets submissions but doesn't exist anywhere on the web? Like, what? Like, you get my point, right? So you do the hacky stuff now, you take technical depth. It's the same thing with software engineering. You take technical depth so you can go fast, which is completely fine, but you sort of hedge the risk there. But then on the commercial side, you don't necessarily do the hedging or the planning, right? You just go with the risk and you're like, yeah, fuck it, let's go. Yeah. Right.
I'm trying to meet that valuation number, trying to catch up with your investment.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, this stuff definitely helps you grow faster, better, scalable, right? Like, we're talking about very sort of simple things, right? And I think you'll sort of you'll feel this example. Somebody submits a form on your website, which is sitting in the marketing system, right? It's just a random person. And let's say your sales team is sitting on a account list, named accounts for each rep, and maybe or maybe not, some of those contacts exist in like attached to those accounts. How do you get that random form submission that has given you either minimal information or maybe you get them through, maybe you can run them through some form of an enrichment, Clearbit, whatever. How do you how does the process map that random person, the form submission, to the right account, so that the right person who owns this account can be like, hey, actually, I know what this is. Like, we don't need to put this through an SDR queue. We don't need to wait 5 hours to get somebody to, reply with, hey, would you like to schedule a demo? You can just straight up get the person who owns the account and say, hey, welcome back. I haven't talked to you in a year. So continue.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example, and something you mentioned earlier really resonates with me. It's similar to software engineering. I've always said that the sales or the buyer journey that you build is a software platform, and the end users are your reps, whether it's sales, marketing, success, etc. And so what you're trying to do is make their day-to-day easier. Like if you build a software platform and your users were not using it correctly, you wouldn't just beat on them and tell them to update their fields better. You would make it easier for them to update those fields and incentivize that behavior.
Or maybe you ask them, like, do you really need this field? Like, do we any of us need any of this?
Why are we doing
I've heard exactly. I've heard the term, like, people have described this also as you build an operating system for your commercial organization, which is kind of cool, because again, like, we're not doing any of this stuff because it's like super fun and super cool. Like, obviously we are doing it because it's cool, but at the end of the day, it has to be useful and it has to be valuable and it has to make somebody's life easier. Otherwise, you've just built a nicer looking Zapier web.
Pretty much. So I want to kind of steer it towards practically, how does it look to have a RevOps team split in this way? Like, say I'm a sales rep and I put my hand up and I say, this field isn't working for me, or this report isn't giving me the information I need. Like, how do you triage those like daily fires if you don't have a marketing success and a sales owner?
Well, for us, it is quite frankly a dedicated Slack channel. We all three of us have dedicated group handles. If somebody knows exactly who they're looking for, they'll ping us. But most of the time, it's the general at RevOps ping, and it's like, hey, what's up? Typically, it's quite clear what the sort of who should be answering it. If like some kind of like validation rule has messed up and your rep can't like close an opportunity, then of course the rev stack folk will show up and be like, okay, let me help you. If there's something wrong with like the data flows, contacts missing, accounts missing, like somewhere we didn't manage to pipe through the entire thing and automatically create what we needed to, then obviously like we'll jump in. There are specific questions typically for data and analysis, but I think we're still nimble enough that we don't need to have like a rigid submit a form and then we'll get back to you in 2 days. Like, we sort of go with it. Obviously, then, because we come from sort of diverse backgrounds, some of us have more experience with other fields. Like I used to be a marketer. I still am a marketer, but that was my background. The Joachim, the manager on the tooling side, he used to be on the sales side. So obviously there are like bits and pieces that each of us know a bit more of, and then in those capacities we can then of course advise. There's something that actually I did remember that would be good to talk about, and that's sort of the idea of, and I think this is what you have on your LinkedIn, and I quite like, revenue operations is an executive function, right?
Yep.
And what does that mean? It means that revenue ops should not just be sitting and waiting for somebody to ask and say, hey, my field is not working, this report isn't showing what I needed to do. Instead, it should be the other way around. Of course, there are fires you need to solve. There are things that go wrong. Then yes, absolutely. But for the most part, revenue ops actually should be a forward steering function, right? If you have the bird's eye view of sales, marketing, success, potentially product, some of the financial stuff, you have a team that is able to run analysis, is able to source data for new accounts, automatically enrich that sort of. At that point, your team really is like sort of helping, yes, the leadership level, but then the day-to-day level as well. Like, hey, here's what we should be focusing on. Here's some new ad audiences. Try this out.
Yeah.
That's what I found really cool at Paddle. We sort of like it is a nice balance between like, hey, here's what's happening. Here's a recommendation versus, hey, okay, I'll help you. Things are wrong. And then there's a third one where I just had it a second ago. It's okay.
All good. Yeah. Well, I completely agree with you. It needs to be an executive function. I mean, if you have an entire company running on technology, how can you make any decisions without considering that technology and that process?
Yeah.
It's not leadership saying, "Hey, we're going after this new industry, change everything for us," or "We're releasing a new product, change everything for us." It's more like, can we release a new product, and when? How would that look? Is it worth it? And do you have any other better ideas? I love that we're slowly creeping into the other side of the glass, so to speak, where the CRO needs a technical background, or at least a technical voice in the room when they're putting together what they think should happen next at a strategic level.
Yeah. Sometimes you get your classic new kid shows up and they're like, you know what, we're changing all of the opportunity stages, let's go. Which I do have I don't know, maybe a slightly controversial opinion on some of this stuff, but I think that the teams that benefit from a metric should not be allowed to define that metric. And I'm specifically talking about, like, let's say the way opportunity stages are set, the way marketing is measured, the MQL, SQL stuff, if you still work with that sort of stuff.
Yep.
If you, because again, the idea is very simple. If you are measured on a metric and you are allowed to define how it's done, there's inherent bias in there. You will end up building it in a way that helps you. And then if you have this disparity of this team is allowed to measure themselves this way, the other team that way, there's another classic scenario where it's sales and marketing do not agree on what the opportunity source was or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's like a classic one. But then that sort of goes into bigger ones where marketing, for example, easily will say, hey, we did good. Look at all this stuff. Look at all these people that we're working with that are engaging with us. All of these opportunities have touch points. And then, on the sales side, you don't see that because the metrics are completely purely focused on that. I definitely think that there should be a centralized unit that is not benefiting from those metrics that end up setting those metrics.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think they should have input, into the process, and they should say their side of things, but it shouldn't be that marketing decides what leads are good enough for sales, and sales decides what customers are good enough for CS, and all the way down the line. Like, you need almost an unbiased party to say, this is the best thing for the most amount of people, rather than this is best for sales. Yeah.
No, 100%. And again, I'm not advocating for tyranny here. I'm not saying like don't talk and listen to anybody, but for sure, like it's maybe that's the point I was trying to make earlier. Another cool part of sort of having this RevOps team set up in this way is when we do get this classic questions of, my field doesn't work, why can't I do this? The report doesn't show me what I want, or can you do this for me in this way? We're privileged to be in a position where we can say, stop. What are you trying to achieve? Please explain the business problem, the thing you were trying to do, and then I will fix the how, right? Instead of sort of having folk come to us and say, I need you to fix it this way. we can be like, okay, yo,
Yeah.
let's take a few steps back. We'll figure out how to fix this or what you need, even if you need, because again, sometimes it's easy to forget that there's a lot of sort of knowledge that's only in your head, right? So I know that Google Analytics is not suitable for audience segmentation, so that it becomes like an active nurture campaign, whatever, right? But then if somebody does ask, like, hey, we need Google Analytics conversion things set up this specific way so I can do whatever, we can say and stop, hey, do you really need Google Analytics, or do we need the HubSpot tracking code paired with a workflow, whatever?
Yeah, it's kind of like letting the people that are experts in their area actually flex those muscles, rather than kind of letting everyone do everything, so to speak. Okay. Yeah. I want to pivot a little now to your story, and we're kind of reaching the end. So this will be my last like large overarching question for you. But like, how did you get into RevOps personally? What is your journey, and like, what are some interesting problems that you've helped solve in this world?
Okay, yeah. So I did mention that I am a marketer, but I started in marketing. Obviously, like my first gig was just a generalist marketer at a company called Catchbox. Some year and a half later, I joined Smartly.io. It's like a paid social media advertising company, SaaS platform, and I started doing events there. We were organizing these localized pop-up conferences around the world for predominantly our customers, like in an educational sense. But then we were also bringing a limited amount of prospects there with sort of meetings, etc. And obviously, at some point, we started getting the question of, well, you're spending 10 grand a pop on these. What's the return? And at the time, we were using a platform called Splashthat to do the website, the registration. We own that, the events team. So it was easy for us to do. And when the questions started rolling in, we were like, okay, well, I guess we need to push these contacts somewhere. Like spreadsheets was a no-go. So that was my intro into integrations, trying to connect Splashthat into Salesforce and HubSpot. Now, again, it was quite early days. The sort of that side of operations and Salesforce administration was still starting up. The HubSpot piece was quite there's a vacuum there. So we were kind of allowed to like tinker around or do our thing, which in hindsight, I would prefer that if 4 years ago me would not be doing integrations like that. But hey, that's the way I started learning. I ended up leading a region, the EMEA region for Smartly in terms of marketing. And then in that course, I also had to work with the marketing CRM, HubSpot. There's quite a lot of work there to do because again, we weren't necessarily focusing too much on managing that tool, whereas all the focus was more on the Salesforce side. So then eventually, I ended up learning how HubSpot works inside out, messing around with it, integrating a couple of other things, started learning coding on the side, because I was quite interested, things like Clearbit, okay, I can just source contacts and information. How do I do it? So started writing a couple of scripts. But the point I'm making here, I learned by doing. Eventually, we started a growth team over there, and our first mission was to completely rebase the HubSpot instance. Did a ton of cleaning up. We just removed a bunch of contacts. We rebased a lot of fields, cleaned it up, set the workflow straight. Did a proper two-way connection between HubSpot and Salesforce. Did some crazy workflows in terms of life cycle stages because we had to sort of emulate the account level, because we were selling to companies, but then marketing works with contacts. So how do you sort of make the sort of entire journey on an account level? So we built some very, very kooky workflows that are but again, that was a very great way to learn. And then after Smartly, I was asked to join Paddle in sort of this capacity of full-time revenue operations in the growth engineering team, specifically to work on these sort of tech stack implementations, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. Yeah. So it's kind of like, I think that's a more common way to get into it is, you know, you are one of the functions, a unique problem comes up with the technology. And, you know, that's really when you separate somebody who can be a technical RevOps engineer and somebody who's really just should be on strategy, so to speak, or should be, you know, leaving the technology to someone else. So I think that's a really interesting perspective. And, you know, when you joined Paddle, did they already have that split, or were you participating in deciding what the RevOps team should look like?
I mean, Ben had a pretty clear vision already of how he wanted to structure the team. At that point, there were only a couple of folk left. So, I mean, we sort of second or third person at that time in the RevOps team. But no, like, I mean, we've obviously talked about the stuff, and we still continue because, again, it's an evolving concept, right? It doesn't need to sit in these three buckets. Maybe like soon we'll realize we need something else, something like another function, etc. So no, the initial idea I did not come up with. In fact, I fell in love with it, and that's why I basically joined Paddle. That was the hook for me to come and work on this stuff full time. But yeah, no, it still keeps evolving, and I hope it does. Like I have to say, I've been very, very privileged to be in a team like this with a company like Paddle that does believe in operations, puts and invests money and time into us, and lets us basically do whatever. We don't really get oversight of like, hey, this is how things need to be set up. We are told the goals, the business level goals, and we figure out how do we build like the sort of technical part that would support our business strategy, goals, expansion plans.
Yeah, that sounds like a RevOps dream. You know, you got the investment, you got the runway, and you got some space to work in. So yeah, that's amazing.
Living the dream.
Yeah. All right, so we're coming up on time. You know, is there anything else that you want to, you know, offer to the listeners and the watchers here, like, you know, any kind of advice that you would offer to somebody looking to get into RevOps or anything like that?
Yeah. Again, it depends on the way you learn best. I personally learn by just trial and error. The little known fact about a lot of these tools is that you can start a free developer account. Now, you don't have to get scared about the fact that it's a developer account. You just create one. It doesn't allow you to use it for commercial purposes, but it basically allows you to like do whatever. HubSpot is maybe the best example. It's my favorite example as well, right? You just Google HubSpot developer account. You maybe do 5-7 clicks, and then all of a sudden you have a brand new HubSpot instance with enterprise level features. And you can work with that. You can practice with it. You can upload contacts, company set workflows. Like it's honestly, like if you want to learn, just go and set up one of these. And a lot of the major players also have like a developer version. I know Salesforce does, but you know, setting up your own Salesforce instance, that's a bit scary. What else? And yeah, I mean, I appreciate that a lot of this is very conceptual and it's hard to translate into like actual advice, because again, most of these problems are very specific to your current situation. And this is again going back to the idea of, or me calling this a creative problem solving exercise, because like whenever I get asked something, I do not know the answer. In fact, I'm wrong a lot of the time. But it's the process of asking questions and figuring out, and then sort of mapping out a couple of potential solutions and just trying. So I guess the last thing I would say is please feel free to ping me on the co-op workspace, and I do believe we're doing the MAA. So I'm happy to answer any kind of questions. Again, I've had the privilege of integrating a ton of tools at this point, from marketing to customer success. I'm not entirely sure if I've ever DocuSign, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, point being,
Yeah.
if you do have questions, please feel free to tag along, ask me. I'll try to help out as best as I can in a written format.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's great advice, and it helps you to learn by doing, like you mentioned earlier, which I think is so important because, again, like you said, these are practical problems. So the theory only gets you so far. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to see it in action, see what's breaking, and then use that developer account to try out a couple solutions. What's the best way to get in touch with you besides the co-op, of course? What's the best way to get in touch with you personally?
Find me on LinkedIn. This is the only social media I hang out anymore. I've deleted everything else. It's the only productive social media so far.
All right.
Yeah, LinkedIn is good.
All righty, LinkedIn it is. Well, Richard Makara, thank you again for joining us. We'll be posting this up on the website, and we'll have your AMA after that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.